All right. Lisa in Lyle asks, my spouse earns $1,000 per week and we have one child. What's the amount of child support that I'm entitled to?
Okay, well, there's a guideline that the state of Illinois has for child support. And for one child, that would be 20% of the non-custodial party's net income. So you do the math here, 1,000 a week, 20%, it's $200 a week.
If that's his net income.
If it's his net and if there are not any unusual deductions coming out of his pay.
Right, because people think that they could have all these exemptions, and so basically, they get a lot less than that, and that's not really your net.
Right, and sometimes they'll have other expenses, automatic payments and things like that coming out of their
Pension.
pay. Got to be careful there.
Right.
Yeah. Well, pension's valid if it's a mandatory pension.
If it's mandatory. Also, union dues, insurance,
Right.
health insurance is.
But remember, the 20% is just a guideline.
Right.
So you have to look at other factors. For example, if you have an athlete that's making $700,000 a year, 20% is going to be excessive. So the court's going to knock that down and deviate from the guideline. But I think in a 1,000 a week situation, 200 a week, I think the court's probably going to try and stick with those guidelines.
Yeah, I think that is going to be reasonable. Now, you mentioned about deviating downward. Let's talk about deviating upward.
Yes.
What would be a reason to deviate upward?
A child with special needs is definitely a deviation upward, or any other exigent circumstances that causes a need for more income to support that child. Maybe there's an educational issue. Maybe there's extracurricular. Maybe the child is a fantastic ice skater and the court feels that that should continue and there's a huge expense there.
Should be nurtured.
The court might deviate upward, but usually it's you're more likely to see a deviation downward as opposed to upward.
Right, and it's important too. You don't have to be an athlete making that kind of money a year, because there are different reasons to deviate downward. One would be, for example, if let's suppose that you have a house and it has some equity, and your agreement is that you're going to let the other person have the house, and so that's calculated into figuring in terms of support. And so, but it has to be crafted very carefully so that it's articulated in your agreement that that's specifically what it is, because child support can be generally modified at any time based upon a change in circumstances. So, but if I'm giving you $100,000 in equity in the house, we're going to get some kind of credit for that normally I would be able to have. So it could be deviated downward in an instance like that. But again, it has to be spelled out in the order as to what the original amount would be and then why it's being deviated downwards.
Another reason to deviate that I see a lot is when one party is going to have the child for 4 days a week, the other party is going to have 3 days a week. So it's a little bit more than the traditional alternating holidays, alternating weekends. You don't have a total split custody, but you do have an arrangement where one party has the child for almost half of the time, but without a court order for that. So the child support isn't necessarily required to be at the statutory guideline, because the person who has visitation is providing quite a bit of the support while they're in his or her care. So that we've seen that before too.
Right, but it doesn't necessarily mean you could still have that arrangement and still pay the full amount of guideline support.
Yeah, I think most people are willing to pay as long as the money is actually being used for the child. And that's an issue too. If the spouse is taking the money and not providing the real care for the child, that's a problem.
Well, people have to understand too, there's no accounting for that. And child support goes for different types of things, like a roof over your head, like the utility bills, like the cable bills, like the food, and all of those other things. So it's not just, oh, well, wait a minute, I can't believe that you spent $200, in just diapers. Well, no, it goes for all those other things as well.
Right.